So, to keep things moving and to wrap up the day, this is the final plenary session, and then after this session, you'll be on to reception and dinner with no formal program. So just time to talk and think and be with your colleagues. But this is a really important group. We're really pleased they could join us this evening, so please, I appreciate if everyone could give your attention just for the final stretch of day one. You've been very patient, okay? This is our chance to get into a much more serious conversation with leading practitioners who are running high schools where they're actually making a difference for the kids in all the ways that you're trying to help with your policies, okay? And just reflecting on the session earlier today where some of your concerns about sustainability and making sure the K-12 educators were really on board and behind this, and how do you sustain support, and how do you have the resources to help the students who need it. All those things are the things that they are living every day. So we really hope you'll give us your attention, and we're thrilled that we have such a great panel. I'm going to start, all I'm doing is introducing the session, and I'm going to come on down and turn it over to J.B. Schramm, who's up to my far left here. J.B., some of you probably know him. He is the head of an organization called College Summit, a national organization. Very impressive organization for those of you who aren't aware of their work. They work in, let's see, over 180 high schools across 12 states, most of them in the ADP network. And their focus is training principals, teachers, and the most influential students in the school to change the culture to a college-going culture in those schools, looking across everything they need to make sure that everyone is pulling in the same direction on behalf of kids for all the same reasons you are all trying to do that at the state level and putting these policy levers in place. JB started College Summit, I think, 1993 in the basement of a low-income housing project in Washington, D.C., serving a handful of students in a teen center. So he built this from the ground up, working with a small number of kids, seeing the need, and trying to figure out how to build a scalable model, working with schools and school districts, as I said earlier, to really change the equation for these kids in ways that we all know is so desperately needed. And it's been very impressive what his organization has been able to do. Just to give you an example, let's see, in recognition of College Summit's work, the Aspen Institute awarded the organization with Education Fellowship with the Kennedy Center's Civic Education Award. I guess it's from the Kennedy Center, it's an award. I know they've had many other awards, international awards. I know they've had honors from the White House. So their work is impressive, but what's most impressive, frankly, is the individuals they work with in the schools. So you'll meet a few of them here today. I've had the privilege of meeting at least one of these three a few months ago, and others who are inspirational. And I've heard them speak privately and publicly, and it always reminds me of why we're all doing this, and that we really do truly have leaders on the front lines who understand that this is the right thing to do, that it is doable, and that most importantly, the kids need our help and support from the top all the way to the bottom. So I'm thrilled they could be here. JB's going to lead a discussion. He's going to introduce the panelists, and then when they're done, I'll just tell you what's coming next. But I really want to turn it over to JB. One other thing I would mention is the program is about school-based program, but recently College Summit has recognized that the programs at the school level won't ultimately be successful if there isn't a policy environment they're operating in that encourages, supports, and facilitates that kind of culture. So College Summit, to their credit, has started getting active in the policy conversations, starting here at the national level, but I know is very eager to be part of in any way they can the work you're doing in your states and to try to help. So that's just something to keep in mind beyond this evening. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to JB and start the conversation.
Thank you, Matt. The last Achieve panel that I did was after a happy hour. And I'm just going to be doing a comparison of energy level, creativity of questions, focus between these two events. But thank you. We are excited to be here. And I want to start off with a note of celebration and acknowledgement for all the progress that you all have been making in driving the policy agenda for reform forward. And then I'm also going to echo what Matt referred to, and I understand that there's been some concerns raised earlier today about, yes, we've made a lot of progress on the policy front. Well, the concern is about implementation, both on the resources side as well as on the know-how and on the expertise to be able to deliver the results that our communities and our students so desperately need. And I think that's why Matt wanted College Summit to be here tonight and bring some of the top school leaders in the country to come and share some of their expertise and insights with you. And I think kind of at the highest level, what we're talking about is how do you develop the culture in schools within which these reform efforts can produce results? So how do you produce the culture in the schools through which the hard work that you've been doing bears its fruit? And at its heart, this conversation is quite connected with the first one you had today, I believe, which was about how to help K-12 schools focus on their students' post-secondary success. And what does college ready really mean if the result of it isn't dramatically more students going to college and succeeding there? Research is clear that in terms of economics, the number one driver of economic growth in our states is the college attainment rate. We know that in our high schools, the schools that are focused on post-secondary success are getting the highest achievement from low-income students. And then in terms of dropouts, we know that dropouts say the number one reason they dropped out of high school is because high school was not relevant in their minds to their job goals and their career goals. And I'll add another point. One of the points I understand that was raised earlier today was the point that in your efforts for reform, you've identified parents as being a group that's undertapped in terms of supporting the reform efforts that you're about. And about 9 months ago, we worked with Deloitte on their National Education Survey. And the results of this were part of Secretary Duncan's speech on high schools a few weeks ago. And according to their survey of parents in low-income communities across the United States, the number one purpose that parents have set for high school is college success. So there really is a natural constituency there that we can tap in support of these efforts. Of course, there's been a lot of progress that you all and your colleagues have been a part of towards making this happen. Secretary Duncan's opening paragraph in his speech on high school said the purpose of the American high school needs to change. It needs to shift from being a destination to being a launch pad for college and career success. And I know a lot of you have been doing the work in states building the state longitudinal data systems that are making it possible for us to follow students from K-12 into higher education. I think you're all aware the Race to the Top set 5 state success factors, and 2 of those success factors for high schools were college enrollment rate and credit accumulation rate. And then, of course, all the work on the Common Core and on rigorous high school graduation standards, as well as the assessments that align with that, are all part of this movement. So now let's turn to the schools. What College Summit's been doing for close to 20 years is helping high schools and school districts raise their purpose from high school diplomas to college success. And the way we do that is by helping schools build college-going culture. Now, I don't think there's probably any question in the group here that culture can be a powerful driver of students' behavior. I think probably the question is, I think we've all seen high schools where the culture in that school just flowed towards excellence and rigor. And we've been to other schools where the culture stifled students' excellence and rigor. So the question is, how do you actually do that? How do you build a culture in the school that is college going, that is supportive of the reform efforts? So let me start by quickly sharing a framework that College Summit uses when we're working with states and districts to help them assess the maturity of the college-going culture in their schools and districts. Could I get the slide moved? So we help the states look at 4 different dimensions. One is around the expectations and knowledge around post-secondary that students hold. The second dimension is around college-ready academic rigor and academic behavior. The third dimension around the culture is signaling, the signals that come through parents, as well as district and school leadership and educators. And then finally, in terms of the student support systems in place to help the school achieve this. So we're now going to hear from 3 school leaders, each who are doing that work to align expectations, academic rigor, signaling, and the student support systems so that their high schools have been able to shift and really focus on rigor. So let me introduce them, and then we'll start off with the questions. Right to my right is Rashid Davis. He's principal of Beta, Bronx Engineering and Technical Academy. They serve an 80% male population of color in New York City. 4 years ago, Beta had no AP courses. Just a couple months ago, U.S. News picked Beta as one of the top high schools in the country. And if you were looking just at the free and reduced lunch sector that Beta is a part of, they ranked 6th nationally. Next to Rashid is Chris Duzenbery. And she leads Quest and Inquiry, which is one of 5 small learning communities that are a part of the Decatur Central Township High School outside of Indianapolis. They have a 50% free and reduced lunch population. They've seen a 15% increase in high school graduation rates in the last 3 years, and also have a 93% attendance rate that they've increased towards their school. And then finally we have Charles Thomas. He's principal of Crossland High School in Prince George's County, Maryland. Crossland has 1,400 students, 98% of whom are African American and Latino. They've achieved quite a turnaround at Crossland. Over the last 6 years, in terms of state assessments, their pass rate for English has gone from 28% to 22% to 78%, and their pass rate for math has gone from 25% to 75%. So can we have a round of applause to welcome our educators? So Charles, I want to start with you. What effect is the cultivation of college-going culture having on student achievement?
I can't overemphasize what the effect has been at our school. I think anyone has to have a purpose for whatever you do. And 5 years ago, when I got, well, actually, this is my 7th year, so 6 years ago when I got to my school, our students had no purpose for coming there. Especially those kids who wanted, or those kids who had the ability to do well. When I think about it now, a lot of times I think about it almost in political terms. You hear people talk a lot about how there are maybe 10% of people on the right and 10% of people on the left, and you got this 80% in the middle who can be influenced by both. We had that going on in my school, and when I got there, it was the negative 10% that was winning the battle. It was those students who were not interested in going to college. It was those students who weren't interested in going to class. And it wasn't just the students, it was some of the teachers as well, and some of the parents as well. And then on the other side, you had that minority of people, that 10% that really believed in what our kids could do, and that really believed in high expectations. Now, the critical part for us was convincing the 80% in the middle to do the right thing. And that struggle was one that we had to win. If we had lost that struggle, we would have lost the school, or we would not have been successful in turning the school around. So all of the things that we did, I think, focused on having more of an influence than those negative influence that the kids were having. And that was even more difficult because a lot of the negative influences were present in the popular culture. And it's very important for high school students to be popular. It's very important for them to be cool. And we had to do something to make academic achievement cool. And we had to do something to make them realize that if you do well, it's safe to do that in this school. A lot of kids in a school like mine was 6 years ago, they are intimidated from doing the right thing because they will be not appreciated, they will be sometimes laughed at, they will sometimes be ridiculed. But we had to make sure that wasn't the case in our school. When I first got there, we had, I believe, 60 students out of we had almost 2,000 students when I first got there. And we had 60 students in that first year that went on to college. In the last 3 years, 90% of our seniors have applied to four-year schools, and over 70% of them have been accepted, and most of the others went to either technical schools or they went to community colleges. But that just wasn't the case when we got there. Now, how do you do that? We had to celebrate every success that we had in our building. We had to establish order. And that is something that can be politically treacherous. But nothing good is going to come out of chaos. We had to establish rules, and we had to establish consequences, and we had to have the courage to enforce those consequences. And you can believe that the people who were screaming the loudest was that 10% on the other side. But eventually, I think I know we were able to turn that around, but it wasn't a very easy thing to do. Now, today, we celebrate every academic achievement that occurs in our school. I like to tell a lot of people that the most important events at our school is not the football games, is not the basketball games. The most important event in our school is our honor roll assemblies. All of our parents look forward to the honor roll assemblies. All of the students look forward to the honor roll assemblies. We have one every quarter. And those things are pep rallies for excellence. Last year, we had a student who had a 4.75 grade point average. He took all AP classes, and he had A's in all of them. And when we have a student who have 4.0 or higher, they come up on that stage. We call out their name, we call out their grade point average, and the kids root for each other now. This kid is a superstar, or he was a superstar at our school because he had a 4.75 grade point average. And when he came off that stage, the other seniors in the school actually came down, met him at the bottom of the stage, picked him up, and carried him back to his seat. Now, he hadn't thrown a touchdown pass, he hadn't won the state title, he had a 4.75 grade point average. And I think that is indicative of what we have been able to do, but it wasn't easy. And now, every senior in our school looks forward to taking College Summit because they are required to do that. It is a rite of passage for every senior in our building. Our parents look forward to them doing that because it helps them every step of the way to go to college. And that's what our school is all about now. When you come to Crosslands, you're going to go to college. And every kid in that building understands that and believes that. Our culture has changed. It wasn't easy, but I think having the goal of every kid going to college and having some success in reaching that goal has been crucial in turning that around.
Thank you, Charles. Chris. Chris, how about you? Tell us about what you've been seeing in terms of shifting the culture.
Well, when you talk about a culture change, it is something that goes along with everything else that you're trying to build within your school. I mean, it is part of the daily life. It has to be what you live every day to actually become part of the culture. And in our school system, we began a reinvention of the way that we did education a number of years ago, and that was indeed a huge change in our culture. So our culture, as far as the way we do school in Decatur Township, has been on an ongoing basis of change for a number of years now. When College Summit came to us, thankfully our superintendent had the vision to be able to see how much of a benefit it would have for our school system. We have about 50% free and reduced kids. We have so many students who are first generation college going scholars. It was the perfect match. And when it comes to how we've been able to embrace that and be able to see the change that in the culture that has occurred, it has primarily occurred through what we call our STAR class. We have an advisor-advisee class period that meets 4 days a week. We have a shortened day on Monday, so we don't have it those days, but we have it Tuesday through Friday. The students are assigned to an advisor who has that student in their STAR class, which stands for Students, Teachers, and Relationships, for the 4 years that that student is in high school. That in itself is a culture-changing process. When you build the type of relationship between a teacher and a student, when that adult knows that student well, and they know what it is that student needs and what they will hopefully be able to achieve in their lives and be able to support them through the process of their schooling, that sets the baseline right there. What we do every day in STAR class is part of the College Summit curriculum. And we are lucky enough to be one of the schools that were offered to the opportunity to pilot the Launchpad curriculum for College Summit, which was designed for grade 9 through 11. And then we have the Navigator curriculum for the 12th graders. It's pretty much an everyday event. Seeps through everything that we do every day. When you hear students who are new 9th graders talking to their friends and their teachers about the courses they chose and what effect that will have on their grade point average if they're taking a weighted class, I mean, my eyes just about bulge out of my head, thinking like, oh my gosh, we have 9th graders worried about their GPA. They actually know what a GPA is. And going through the types of classes or the coursework that we do in our STAR class, it just sets the tone for that. And the fact that the teachers know the kids so well. Pretty much everything we do, even in the classes themselves, when teachers are talking about their assignments they do and how that's going to affect the students down the road or what courses they choose for college admissions requirements. Other things that help us change the culture would be the kinds, and Charles had alluded to this, the kinds of celebrations you have for the successes that the kids experience. I just got an email from one of my senior STAR teachers a couple days ago that said, just want to let you know that the students who meet, and they had it listed like 5 or 6 milestones, the students who have met these milestones will be having a cookout on Friday. And so they're celebrating the seniors that have met a certain number of milestones. So we see basically the culture then translate into higher achievement based on the fact that the kids actually care about what they do. They find it to be relevant now.
Thank you. Rashid, I've heard you talk about a college-going system that you use in your school, and that's, I think, across faculty, curriculum, et cetera. Can you talk about how you designed that system? And
Right. Well, in New York City, fortunately, through mayoral control, Chancellor Klein has given the double-edged sword of principal autonomy and accountability. So therefore, we have the freedom to really create the reality in which we choose to live or die on the sword. So through that, it's really, I've taken first thinking about my limitations, knowing that, of course, I can't do everything alone. We have a small school of 465 students, and so the assistance, the support that I have starts with 3 assistant principals, 3 guidance counselors, 1 guidance counselor that works exclusively with the 9th grade. So therefore, the expectation is coming into 9th grade, there's a 90% promotion rate. And that promotion rate includes students passing at least 2 Regents exams and trying to strive towards having an 80 average in each content area subject. It's about knowing that every student is aiming for an advanced Regents diploma. There are different diploma types in New York State. The advanced Regents is the higher, more college-ready diploma type. And it's about having aspirational goal setting. So with 465 students, there are 48 adults in a building. Every single adult are tied to groups of students that act as angels, angel adoptees. We are all familiar with the graduation requirements. We are all familiar with the designated in terms of push heading towards the advanced Regents diploma. It's a constant battle. As JB mentioned, I have an 85% male population with 90% of the school being free and reduced lunch. As the instructional leader, I take pride in saying that when the students decide that they come to Bronx Engineering Technology Academy, that probably ends their selection process. Because from day 1, I am in charge of their program from grade 9 through 12. So therefore, I make sure that they get the courses that are needed for college. Before they graduate high school, they would have experienced at least 2 advanced placement courses. I'm able to make sure we have 12 advanced placement courses, and it's not streamlined, it's not teacher referral, it's not if they have scored an 85. We know that in order for them to be best prepared for the academic rigors and realities of college, we don't want them to leave high school without having their academic behaviors to change. So we make them be introduced to academic difficulty early on, so that way they learn how to take advantage of the supports that we have in place for writing, for reading, for extra academic assistance. And so you have, it's an intense, supportive environment with faculty and staff. And it's also about teachers, faculty, and staff also continuing their learning, continuing in school, whether it's formal education or professional development. So it's constantly growing everyone, and not just the students. And so when students see adults continue learning, that encourages them, and they see that we're not just trying to push them to do something better, but we're trying to grow as a community.
thank you. We're seeing that a lot of the leading schools are using student-to-student peer influence to shift culture. So Charles, can you tell me whether you have seen areas where students can drive change more effectively than administrators or teachers?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. I think one thing that is probably common to every high school student everywhere is that they are more influenced by their friends than they are by adults. They're more influenced by their friends than they are by teachers, administrators, or parents. And it is critical, I believe, to have influential students in the school saying the same things that the teachers and the principal are saying as well. I think my school has, from the beginning, we have emphasized, especially to our seniors, their role as role models in the school. And I think they have done an outstanding job in trying to influence their peers in the right way. I think that College Summit has a model for that. The peer leaders that are trained every summer have done an excellent job with that. But I think that we have also, we've gone beyond that. One of the things that we have at our school is something called the Principal's Leadership Team. And I think about that right now because right before I came over here today, I had my first meeting with the Principal's Leadership Team for this year. And those are students that are nominated by the staff, but I make the selection myself. And what we are searching for are one representative from every student organization in the building. Because after my first year there, we did a survey of all of our students. And one of the things that came through loud and clear in that survey was that my students felt like they did not know their principal. They had not had an opportunity to talk to me or to get to know me. And so in response to that, I said, okay, we're going to have a principal's leadership team, and I'm going to meet with these kids the last Wednesday of every month. That's when we meet. And I sit down with them, and I share information with them that I share with teachers. Today, as traditionally we do now, I shared our school's budget with the students on the principal's leadership team. They now know that knowledge is power. They know how much money each department in our school has. They know also that when we make some of the decisions that we make, they know the reasons why we make them. They now understand the budget process. And one of the questions that came up when I showed the kids how much we were spending on textbooks, one of the students raised their hand today and said, well, my Spanish textbook is hardly even a textbook anymore. And I said, well, now you know that we have a $7,000 budget for textbooks, and you can go back and tell your Spanish teacher, I need a new textbook, and I know we have $7,000 for books, buy me a book. But I think that by having a representative from every student organization, they will go back and share that information with their friends. When we make a controversial decision now in the school, when we meet, or even when we don't, when they see me in the hallway, or now they feel like they can walk into my office whenever they feel like it, they will be able to come to me and say, Mr. Thomas, this is what's going on. Why is that? And they know that I will tell them. And then they can go back and share that information with their friends, because their friends will believe them before they will believe me. It is critical. I think it is absolutely critical for a principal to have that communication. Just as critical, I think, as it is for a general to talk to the soldiers on the ground. That is the only way that you can know what's really going on in your building. And by empowering those kids with not only that information, but all other types of information, they will be your allies as opposed to your enemies. And that was one of the things that we did that I think went a long way toward moving that 80% in the middle over to the philosophy that we had when we came in that said, we have high expectations for you. You are going to go to college. You are going to take AP classes. You're going to take honors classes, and you're going to do well. They put their arms around that. They embraced it because I think at this point we have earned their trust.
Thank you. Chris, can you share a couple strategies you've seen teachers using with their peer leaders?
What comes to mind immediately is something that had just occurred a few weeks back. And incidentally, we've been in school for about 3.5 weeks now. I don't know what time school starts around here, but it's been going on for quite a while, it seems like, with us. During freshman orientation, which is the week before school starts, The teachers of the new ninth graders will get together and they will have their group of students that will be assigned to their STAR class. And I'm talking about the ninth grade STAR teachers. And they utilize the peer leaders from our community, which there are, I think each teacher was assigned 2 or 3 peer leaders to help them out during that freshman orientation clean slate event day. And the students have been through all those kinds of activities and the things that they would need to know, you know, find your lockers, check out your schedule, do all those kind of innate little things that you have to do, you know, during orientation. But then again, there were a number of activities that the students needed to be able to do, group building and those kind of things, that the teachers actually used the peer leaders to facilitate those activities with them. So that was something that was pretty invaluable. The ninth graders would then look to the seniors. They've already been through all this. They know it. You know, we can trust them to be able to do those kind of things. As far as another method that we have been using and will continue to use is that each of the peer leaders are assigned to a specific grade level, and then they partner with those teachers. They will come to those STAR classes and help facilitate activities and help the teachers work through those things in their classes. The kids usually, I mean, they sit up and take notice because they trust the fact that their peers have been through this already and they know what they're doing. So it really helps the teachers out a lot.
Good. So now I want to turn to some specific policy issues that a number of folks here in the room have been working on. Many ADP states have adopted rigorous high school graduation requirements, default requirements for all students. And Indiana was an early leader in this effort with the Core 40 diploma. So Chris, can you share any observations from your school's perspective about the Core 40 and what the influence has been in the school?
I think up to the point in time that the state of Indiana made Core 40 the default diploma, I think students would just look at, well, how can I get out of high school with the least amount of work and just barely meeting the graduation requirements. And at our school, the state of Indiana has an academic honors track of diploma, the regular Core 40 and the general diploma. And each one of them at our school prior to a couple of years ago were all 47 credits. So you had to have the exact same number of credits, but the credits as far as what requirements within that 47 credits differed. It was much more advanced for the academic honors diploma. When the Core 40 diploma became the default diploma and students knew that that was the minimum requirements that they could meet, then it's like anything else. You raise the expectations, then the performance will increase. And we've seen a much better approach to planning out high school and how it's going to work for them. More kids actually look to trying for the academic honors diploma initially, and down the road sometimes they may get kind of knocked out of the running for that, but they definitely embrace the Core 40 diploma now because it is the default diploma and it's raised expectations.
So Charles, some people will say that when you raise expectation, or the raising of expectations leads to more students failing. How do you look at that challenge? How do you address those concerns and build the support for higher expectations?
Well, first of all, I don't believe it. And I think that you have to start there. I think parents are very smart. And if you try to sell them something that you don't believe yourself, they're not gonna buy it. But we have worked very, very hard to convince our parents that the only way that our students are going to catch up is by accelerating as opposed to slowing down. And I have that conversation so many times, because what we do, we base a lot of our class assignments on literacy, on reading levels. And if a student comes to us reading on grade level, then they are required to take at least one honors class. And if they pass that honors class, they are required to take at least one AP class. So there aren't too many students in our school who don't take at least one AP class before they leave. And very similar to what Rashid was saying before, I don't want any of my students to go to college and fail. I want them to be aware of what's going to happen. I want them to be aware of the challenges so that when they get there, it's not like jumping into the ocean when you don't know how to swim. But you would be surprised at how many times I have to convince parents that, yes, your child can do this. I have many parents come to me and they say, I want my child out of this AP class. And when I ask the reasons, they will say, well, I don't want to hurt their GPA. And I have to convince them that you want your child to go to college, but ma'am, if they go to college and they're not prepared, they're going to be taking remedial classes in college. And when they take those remedial classes, they aren't going to get any credit. But you will still have to pay for it. And if they fail, you're not going to get your money back. We have to prepare them before they get there. But I have to have that conversation with parents, and I have to have that conversation with students. And there is legitimate fear that their kid will fail. And what they don't realize is they have a legitimate fear that their kids don't have the ability. And we are constantly convincing parents and convincing students that, yes, they do have the ability. And that is why we try so hard to celebrate every academic success. In fact, when our kids get 4.0s, you know, we actually give them plaques, engraved plaques. And we have a budget for those, and believe me, that budget is being busted every year. And I think that's wonderful. But it gives the kids an incentive to do well. And believe me, at Crosslands, students compete for 4.0s because they want that plaque. And the parents want that plaque. And so the parents come to the honor roll assemblies to celebrate those plaques. But before, I just want to say one more thing. Our PTA has been critical in changing the academic culture of our school. When I got there in 2004, there was no PTA. In the last 6 years, we've had only 2 PTA presidents. And they have supported us in everything that we tried to do. Without that cover from the parents, a lot of the innovations that we have had would have been blown away when they got to the board. Because, again, we have that 10% that is very loud and very against and very negative. But they have been drowned out by the positive voice of the PTA who supports what we're trying to do.
I imagine there's a few of you who are experiencing that same 10% negative, 10% positive, and how do you get that 10% positive to be influencing the 80 in the middle? Maryland, New York, Indiana have all adopted the Common Core. Rashid, any observations from your vantage point on the Common Core's impact to date, or where you see it going in New York?
Well, the good thing is that over the summer, at least some principals, we were pulled together to go over the Common Core, even actually right before New York decided to adopt it. And so looking at a lot of similarities in terms of what happens in AP English language, in terms of for many freshman composition courses, in terms of the attention to nonfiction writing, and many of the skills that are in the English part of the Common Core is very exciting and welcoming in terms of to schools, as well as for math, in terms of we know that for the college piece, 4 years of math are required, or at least getting the students to pre-calculus, if not AP calculus. But I hope that there are more conversations about how the skills really, even though we're first looking at English and math, there's many skills that are interdisciplinary. And so we can take a lot what we see coming from English and really turn it very easily to social studies. We can see a lot of the skills from math and turn it into the sciences. So trying to have the conversations from the teachers, not thinking content specific about, but skill specific about what we know is important for literacy. And so really it's how do we use an interdisciplinary approach as we move toward the Common Core standards. And at least I know in my school, I'm approaching it as an interdisciplinary approach because it's skills that we've been talking about for years. We know that through the SAT, the SAT2s, the College Board, or their ACT exams, we know the skills that will help students be successful in any content. And I'm happy to see that the Common Core, at least in English, when it comes to the nonfiction approaches, really lends itself to a great interdisciplinary approach.
I've got another question for you coming from New York, and it's around assessments. A number of states are looking at how you can use assessments to gauge whether students really are academically college ready on the K-12 side, but assessments that are also used by post-secondary to determine if students are going to be in need of remediation.
Right.
And so the CUNY and SUNY have been an upper level score on the Regents exam in math and English will allow a student to not need to take the entrance exam, the placement exams.
Right.
So tell me what you've been seeing with that in your school.
Well, in terms of the key is a 75 on the English Regents or 75 on the math, according to CUNY, would help the student indicate that that's the student's not needing any remediation. And so knowing that, we said, okay, well, no student will leave without scoring a 75. So you have to retest until you get a 75 on the English and math. Now, of course, a 75 is a middle 3. And many of my students, 90%, come in at a 2. So we believe in rigorous testing. For example, last year, every single 9th grader took physics, not active physics, but Regents level physics. And they actually sat for the Regents exam. And so people were incensed that I would put 9th graders in terms of who were struggling with algebra through physics. And I said, well, you know what? We know that 9th grade is where students have already made a decision to drop out of school. But if academically you get them to think differently, and what physics does is that definitely challenges you mentally. We saw an additional 20% promotion rate overall in 9th grade because it changed their academic patterns in terms of being introduced to a more academically rigorous content area. So exposing students, pushing students more is a big difference. And in striving in terms of for a 75, that's really a common aspect of our culture. You can hear students in the 10th grade because we have as many 9th graders who will sit for Regents. So when you hear a parent saying they don't want the students' averages to be impacted, and I'm a big believer in aspirational goal setting and creating, as I said, creating the reality in which you want to live. For many of my students, we need to demystify the exam. And so when you look at my state report card, you will see that I will very easily test 200 and some odd students in the English Regents each year. Why? Because I want to make sure that as soon as and I'll test 9th graders. Every single 9th grader will sit through the English Regents. Because once a student experiences success, you'll hold on to them longer. And you'll be surprised that life has not gotten in the way for many 9th graders, but by the time the 11th grader, it's hard to wheel them back in if they haven't tasted academic success. So by exposing them to the more rigorous exams earlier on, I'm finding, at least in my school, with more by 80% male population, that's causing them to stick around longer. And so once they've experienced success, it's a little fight, but we get them to retest until they get to the 75. So it's about, once again, teaching them how to take advantage of those supports and having teachers having those conversations about the students from class to class and how we can work with them so that way the student see the value in terms of retesting and knowing that what we're doing is not just try to get you out of high school, but we know that the next level, whether it's a 2-year school or 4-year school, we need for you to be academically prepared.
Thank you. I've got one more question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the floor. a number of districts and a number of schools are now using or bringing post-secondary outcome data on college enrollment, credit accumulation, persistence data into the high school. And I'd be interested in any observations on that. Charles, anything that you've seen about the value of having post-secondary outcome data in your hands in the school?
Oh yes, absolutely. I can't help but think about an anecdote that you're familiar with, JB. I don't know if anyone else in here is, but you know, we at Crossland we have what we call an academic hall of fame, and our academic hall of fame is 4 or 5 kids that we feature in our lobby every year, and now you go in there and you see these photographs all over the place, and the parents are very proud. It motivates the other kids in the building. How do I get up there? What I got to do? One of the students up there is a young lady named Destiny Stewart, and she's one of my favorite students. She has a couple of my favorite parents. And Destiny was, such an outstanding young lady. It's hard not to love her. I'm sure you all know children like that. She was, always on the honor roll. We put her in the Hall of Fame. She was just outstanding. She went on to college. I thought I had done well. I thought about Destiny, and I would want to pat myself on the back. But I got a letter from her mother after her freshman year, and as always, her mother was very graceful and very kind. She told me that she was really grateful for all the stuff that we had done for her daughter. She thought that Crossland had made a tremendous change and was really becoming a really good school. But she also told me that her daughter was struggling in one of her classes in college. And she told me about how Destiny would tell her how her roommate wasn't having those problems because she learned all that stuff in high school. And that, that's one of those conversations that stay with you. I can't get that out of my mind. I think about it on a regular basis. I tell the story a lot in my faculty meetings because I want my teachers to be aware of this. But I knew that we had not done the type of job preparing this young lady for college that we thought we had. And if Destiny's mother had not told me, I would never have known. And that, I think, illustrates how important it is for people like me, the principals in the high schools, to have some type of information, some type of data to let us know how our kids are doing when they leave. Otherwise, we can think we're doing a wonderful job, and we can send these kids off to college, and we are abject failures, and we don't even know. So from that feedback that I got from her mother, we made many changes in our school that I think are benefiting the students that we have today. And I know that every principal, if they care about their kids, they need information about how they're doing when they leave.
Thank you. Rashid, you're getting some of that post-secondary outcome data through, at least through the CUNY system. Mm-hmm. Have you been learning anything, and what's the kind of data you're finding the most helpful?
Well, at least there's a data sharing agreement between the City University of New York and all of New York City schools. And that data really highlights students who were in college in 2007. My first graduating class was 2008, and the second was 2009. So, but through College Summit, I get data from the National Student Clearinghouse. And one of the scariest things is to see evidence that your experiment works. And the experiment of the high expectations and the pushing students in terms of to what you think they can do. 78% of that first graduating class came in scoring below the 3 in terms of their average of reading and math. So they really were not prepared based on the assessments for high school. But we knew that we still had to push them and do what we could within a 10-period day, sometimes what seemed to be a 10-hour day to give them what we needed. Through the National Student Clearinghouse, we know that 78% of our first graduating class are in their second year of college, and 79% of that second graduating class are still there. And so we know the research that the first year of college is when many students drop out. So when I saw the data from the National Student Clearinghouse that said that 78% of those students who graduated are actually completed their sophomore year, I had a meeting. And I said, I want you all to, we have what's called the open market system to where teachers can actually use that from a time period to look for other jobs in other schools. And I made the announcement, I wanted to be perfectly clear that anyone who was not on board with the pushing that we were doing, that they should quickly take advantage and seek employment at one of the other schools via the open market. Because we now had proof, because I knew the college statistics that said that more than 50% of students drop out in the freshman year of college. But we now had data that said 78% of our students were not in year one, but completed year two. And on top of that, we have a Facebook page with the students. And so I asked many of them to send me transcripts. And so many of them sent me their unofficial transcripts. And so then we did case studies, actually seeing in terms of the progress that they had made. And many of them came back and did a panel and said, yes, we're glad that you pushed us through those AP courses because it better prepared us. And so using the data from the National Student Clearinghouse, as I said, it rejuvenates me in terms of to make sure that I give my staff the support that they need to endure with the hard work of trying to push students who really don't know the value of education and who don't know the value of what we're trying to do to make them study and to make them change their academic habits. So as I said, the National Student Data Clearinghouse that shows me the percentage of my students who are in private school, public school versus students who left the state and the state has been very, very invaluable.
And the work that you all are doing in terms of getting data, which I heard Charles referencing, which is actually which students are passing which courses through the first year, the second year, and so forth, can be so valuable in the planning. Now let's open it up for any questions. And Matt, just let us know when we need to take our last question. But please, over here.
I want to follow up on Rashid's comment, because I think I know as leaders you can have vision and passion, but if your staff doesn't form a cohesive team to deliver that vision and passion, you're not going to have much success. Could each of you speak to what extent you have control over hiring, assignment, removal, and formulating your team as a cohesive unit, and what strategies do you employ to make sure everybody's on board?
It's really about transparency. Before I became a teacher, I was a U of T delegate, and so I knew the contract. I believe in the contract. I believe in teachers. I believe in the profession. And I also believe that sometimes we are going to always work more than what we are ever paid for. And I'm going into year 5, and I, knock on wood, I've never had a grievance. And so it's about, as I said, having tough conversations. It's about having honest conversations. It's about this school may not work for you. You may have to go somewhere else. It's about, okay, well, you taught AP last year. Well, you didn't get good results. You're not teaching it this year. So it's about being transparent. It's not being subjective. It's looking at the results. It's looking at the outcomes. It's what's best collectively for everyone. Oh, that was the mic. And so I do have the freedom of hiring and documenting and to suggest that maybe this is the wrong career for some people. But it's about doing that work and having those conversations, not being personal, but saying what's in the best interest for children? How do I best support you? Am I not giving you enough support? Do I need to send you to professional development? So it's making sure that teachers have the tools first and foremost that they need for the tough job that they do. But then also looking at outcomes and looking at other data points to make sure that if things are not adding up, we just don't continue to do the same thing over and over again.
I'd say almost ditto to the nth degree there. And I know that our superintendent has basically charged all the principals with get the most effective teachers in front of those kids that you possibly can. If they're not effective, then work on improvement plans, assistance. If that doesn't work, find, try to help them find a different way to go. And as long as we, and the transparency is huge. I mean, you basically just put it out there. This is what we need for effectiveness. This is what you're going to have to do. And this is what we expect out of you. And that's really what has worked for us. I mean, the people who want to do it and have that drive and desire to be the most effective teacher to be in front of the kids, then they're the ones that stick around.
Charles?
I think that that is the most critical element of what we had to do. Is the most important person in the building are those teachers. It's interesting, but in the past, when I look at my staffing roster right now, 70% of those teachers were hired by me in the last 6 years. Now, every time I hired a teacher, I saw it as an opportunity. And the thing that I told myself is whoever I hire has to be better than the person that left. And by and large, we have been able to do that. Now, I think that teachers, more than anything else, when they come to work every day, they want to feel that they're in a professional environment. They want to be respected by their students and by the people that are in administration. I know my teachers want organization. I know my teachers need to be motivated. And I know that in many cases they need to be inspired. Now, I know that it is very, very difficult to administratively fire a teacher, at least in the state of Maryland. It probably is everywhere. What I prefer to do if a teacher doesn't leave of their own volition is to make them better. And I believe that what we have in place at our school legitimately makes our teachers better. Every teacher in our building has a performance plan. They know exactly what their responsibilities are. They know exactly what their goals are, and they are held accountable for that. We check attendance for teachers, just like we do for students, and we hold them accountable for that. Many of our teachers who have left of their own volition, they leave for that reason, because they know that we want them to be at work 98% of the time. And we talk about it all the time. And when our teachers have perfect attendance, we recognize them just like we recognize the students when they do well. Every quarter we have recognition meetings for teachers just like we have honor roll assemblies for the students. But teachers need to be motivated. And they need to be in a building where students aren't cursing them out, where students aren't disrupting their class. They need to be in a building where they know they can talk to their administrator. They need to be in a building where they are empowered to make decisions in their classrooms because they know more about what's going on in their classrooms than I do. I don't pretend to be the expert in math, science, social studies, and history. I don't. I have teachers who are. And I respect their professionalism. I respect their knowledge. I listen to them. And most of our initiatives in our building are thought of by our teachers. They are organized by our teachers. They are implemented by our teachers. And most of them are successful because they are implementing their plans. And they don't want their plans to fail.
Charles, I've heard you say something that I think informs a conversation about the human capital systems that you need in districts. And you mentioned that 70% of your faculty or faculty you brought on. My understanding is those teachers were not primarily brought on through your district's human capital system. Why don't you describe how you did it, which might be a lens for some of folks who are trying to make it possible to build human capital systems that can be more effective?
Most of the teachers that we have, we recruited nationwide. and we use the infamous Craigslist to find them. I'm very serious. We have teachers in our school who come from some of the finest universities in this country. We have teachers who are young, and they are incredibly intelligent, and they are incredibly motivated. And they come to our school dedicated to making a change in our society. They are loyal, and I am loyal to them. They are our #1 resource. But if I would have just sat there and waited for our human resources department to send me a teacher, they would not have been those kind of teachers. Many of our teachers, when you come into the building, you walk the hallways, you would think that they all came from Teach for America. But no, they didn't. They came from Craigslist. They did.
Do you have another question?
I was just wondering, are all 3 schools public schools? And
Yes.
are all 3 schools staffed with union personnel?
Yes.
Yes.
And Charles, for you, well, you said 6 years ago your enrollment was 2,000. I think if I heard correctly, it's now 1,400.
14, yes, ma'am.
What do you attribute that change in enrollment to?
Well, what happened was our district built a new school. They built a new high school, and many of our students who had been on the fringes of our boundary were sent to the new school.
Other questions, please?
Thank you. Susan Castillo, the chief from Oregon. We all know the important role that leaders play in education today and in turning schools around and turning student performance around. What's your advice to this room filled with policy leaders as we're looking at moving forward with high expectations for all of our children after listening to each other and your experience as leaders and doing the remarkable job that you're doing? What is your advice to us in our efforts to support leaders and build strong leadership for our schools?
I would say, let's not wait for the school to need to be turned around. I mean, unfortunately, we wait for schools to fail and then we give them more money when we have the same populations. I mean, as I said, my school is more than 90% free and reduced lunch. But there are many programs that my students don't qualify for because my school isn't failing. So we need to be able to create policies that give the support to the proven track records that we know need the supports. So as policymakers, we need to be able to say that your school has more than 50% free and reduced students. You need X number of supports, so that way they could get the, whether it's enrichment, whether it's the college readiness information, whether it's the additional healthcare things, and as opposed to waiting until they've gone beyond the threshold where additional supports then will help to make it turn around. So it's really about being preventive, having policies that say even those schools have not demonstrated failure, and I don't even want to call it a reward system, but knowing, we know what the data says for high poverty, high minority schools. The supports need to be in place before they need to be turned around.
Rashid, what I've heard you, the term I've heard you say is a race to the top within states for individual schools.
Yes. I mean, I should be able to apply for my own Race to the Top funds because I can't wait for the state to give me additional funds because I'm not a failing school, so I won't get in terms of what I need to really help all of my students. I've created, through principals having the autonomy, I even have a position called a Director of Graduate Support who helps my students transition to college. And so I'm spending resources making sure that my students who are in college, you'd be surprised of how much assistance we do with even renewing FAFSA. So it's about really how do schools really be able to advocate through policymakers. I know TRIO hasn't released their application for individual high schools to be able to apply for their own TRIO grant, but we need other grants as well that schools can directly apply to help with that whole college readiness piece, because it's a non-stop world in terms of that transition once the students go to college. We even drive students in terms of to college. And of course, there's no budget allocation that help in terms of with that. So it's really looking at policies that help with the transition piece before coming to high school. Like bridge programs have to be funded. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The bridge from grade 8 to 9 and the bridge from grade 12 to college. We need to really try to find a way to do that.
Charles.
Yeah, I've always wanted to give advice to a group like this.
Now you got
Okay, here we go. I love something Rashid said earlier. I wish we had the same type of philosophy. But I think that autonomy and accountability, and listen, and if I can just elaborate for a second, I would love to be able to do what I think is best for my school. Because I think no one knows my school better than I do. I practically lived there for the last 7 years. I know my students. I know my building. I know my staff. I know my parents. Nobody knows them as well as I do. Nobody cares as much as I do. I would love to have the autonomy to do what I think is best for my building. I want to be accountable. If I do what I think is best and it fails, you won't have to fire me. I'll fire myself. I will accept, and I think most principals would, accept responsibility if given the autonomy. And last but not least, I would love to be listened to. It is so, it's difficult to always have directive after directive after directive coming down to you, and you know when you see them that they're not going to work. You know when you try to implement them that they're going to be next to impossible, but you soldier on because that's your job. But I would not think about trying to run my school without listening to my teachers. It is amazing to me that so many people above me will try to run these districts without listening to the principals, because no one knows more about these schools than we do. And we are invested in these schools heart and soul, and nobody cares about these schools more than we do. Autonomy, accountability, and just listen.
Please.
Joe O'Brien, Colorado. JB, first of all, thank you so much for your decades worth of vision and effort. It's really appreciated, and the panel is top flight. We are getting so much out of this. Thank you. The screen shows 4 big framework elements. One of them is signaling. And I'm wondering if the panel could very quickly talk about students and how they get signals along the way that they know they're on track, and what's the exchange for a kid to take responsibility and hear themselves and see. I mean, there's formal testing. I get it. Your city, your state has that. But tell us a little bit about how your mind is evolving about how kids get early warning signals, and how does that communication occur, both in terms of teacher talk, so I'm sure there's that, but Colorado's trying to think through how does students take ownership and start to, with smartphones and with ways of getting signals on how they know that they're mastering, they're on level, or they're out ahead.
Well, there are clear data points that we use in terms of through CSNAP, which is a college piece, through College Summit. So there are clear benchmarks for every grade of milestones that students are expected to do for the college readiness piece, but also in terms of for the academic piece. Every single term, what we do is we post data. So it's on track towards graduation, almost on track or off track. And we use just the colors green, red, and yellow. You know, red means, you know, you're completely off track. So, but it's also about signaling and reaching out. If a student has been absent twice in a week and no one has contacted that home, that's a problem, because every single student should be able to have an adult in terms of that have access to them. So it's about transparency with posting data, so that way even before the data is needed to be posted, like in grade 9, we say that by the end of your first semester, these are your expected outcomes. So it's always have check-in points and benchmarks. Benchmarks for the middle of the year, expectations at the end of the year, and what you may need to do in summer if you have not met those expected outcomes.
I think it's also important that the teachers be provided as much information at any given time that they can get a hold of about each student that they touch every day. So they know where those students stand as far as their academic performance and their on-trackness, if you want to, it's probably not a word, but so they're able to then step in and provide interventions and supports and strategies to be able to get the student to the point they're on track.
I also think that ultimately education is about relationships. And we have tried to implement different structures in our building that fosters those relationships. For example, all of our students have the same counselor from the time they enter the building until the time they graduate. All of our students have the same administrator from the time they enter the building until the time that they graduate. Both those individuals check their attendance on a weekly basis. Both those individuals check their grades on a quarterly basis. Both those individuals are communicating with their parents for all issues, positive and negative. And at least in our school, that is such a critical element, because the vast majority of our students live in single-parent homes, and their parents work very hard. In many cases, they have 2 or 3 jobs. And in so many cases, our kids are forced to be adults before their time, because they have siblings that they have to go home to every day. And sometimes they have to cook. Sometimes they have to be the disciplinarian. But they're only 15 or 16 years old themselves. So they need a caring adult in their lives, someone they can go to, and someone who will allow them to be a child. When they need to cry and when they need to talk, they need somebody there for them. So I think that is one of the most critical elements that we were able to establish in our school to make all of our kids feel like our school was home.
Can I just say something about the signaling in terms of, because you all are policymakers, we want to make sure that we don't send the wrong message, because when we talk about college readiness, but we also talk about promotion, and we know that sometimes promotion from one grade to the next isn't college readiness. For example, a student may need to have 8 credits to be promoted to grade 10, but we know that, of course, if the student have earned 11 credits, they're better on track to graduate in 4 years. So in terms of, because you're policymakers, making sure that the policy is college ready and not an alternative. So because many places have promotion rates, but yet we're saying we are trying to strive to be college ready, but promotion rates are definitely less than college ready.
And I'd add one other point as you're thinking about the different levels from middle school to high school and so forth. We did an interesting pilot with Decatur Township last year where their middle school provided data on the rising 9th graders. And what we looked at are predictors of eventual dropping out, pass failure rates, attendance rates for those 8th graders, and identified 50 students who were, based on 8th grade behavior at a high likelihood of dropping out. and then focused attention in the 9th grade on them through, frankly, peer leaders and some other efforts, and saw, I think, over a 25% decrease in the dropout rates from the year before for that same subset. So I think it's important to make sure we're getting that data shared from elementary, middle, high school, and on to post-secondary. I think we may be, Matt's making movement here, and I think we may be at our time.
Yes. Well, let me just say, informative, but most importantly, inspirational. I want to thank all 4 of you for taking time out of your days. I know especially for those of you who are working in your schools, you actually had to leave your real work to come join us. But I think everyone got a lot out of this session, and I'm sure is going to want to talk to you more after the session. So many, many thanks for taking time and inspiring us. JB, thanks to you, as I said, for not only organizing this, but for all the work you're doing through College Summit. Achieve is going to be eager to continue to work together with you to help get this joint mission done. Real quick, this is the end of a very long day, so thanks to all of you for bearing with us. I know it's been tiring, exhausting, hopefully energizing all the same. I can promise a little bit of fun. There's going to be a reception starting at 6:30 right out in the hallway here. And then in this room at, let's see, 7:15, dinner will be served. Again, there won't be any program. Just come and enjoy your colleagues, interact. Looking ahead till tomorrow, 8 a.m. back in this room, there'll be a breakfast session. Again, the morning will be about the Common Core standards. The morning session with the Common Core standards writers to talk about the implications of the standards themselves, followed immediately by a very powerful panel talking about Common Core implementation. Or I encourage you to take a look at your agendas for that. And then immediately following that will be Secretary Duncan, as Mike mentioned this morning, coming to talk about the future of assessment. In particular, we expect how that might be supported by Race to the Top. And you can let your imaginations go from there, but I'm guessing your imaginations won't have to wait too much longer to see what he has to say. So we encourage you to be here. At that point, please bear with us tomorrow morning. The exact timing of that might have to fluctuate. We may have to ask you to not take a break at a time you might want to take a break, but we're trying to coordinate as best we can with the Secretary's office. And then the rest of the agenda tomorrow will get us deeper into Common Core implementation and some breakout sessions, and then back to finish off with how can ESEA reauthorization support all the good work you're doing. So it promises to be a very jam-packed but exciting day. Please join us. Actually, food will be served 7:30, 6:30. Wow. Okay, even I have to work hard to get here for that. But there will be food available earlier, and then the meeting will actually start at 8 a.m. So encourage you to come. Once again, I have to say Arnie Duncan will be here tomorrow. I'm sure he'll get a standing ovation, but I actually believe these folks deserve a standing ovation for all of their hard work. So thank you.